Hello, this is Todd Albee with SilverFire, and today we're going to go over the Hunter, which is a Tlud stove, a top lit updraft stove. What's really great about the Hunter is unlike a rocket stove, Tluds are usually a little faster cooking and a little cleaner burning, and they're a batch loaded stove, meaning that we insert our fuel vertically, light it, and off it cooks and we don't have to monitor it. Typically running this Hunter stove on twigs, I'm going to get anywhere from about 2 to 2.5 hours on twigs. If I pack it with dense hardwood, I can drive the stove for much more prolonged periods, or pellets are going to burn for several hours. And so this is a really fantastic stove. It also is the first portable biomass stove. It only weighs 14 pounds, so it's only 1.5 pounds heavier than our rocket stove. And this stove, as you see, has a chimney. The chimney comes with 4 sections, and you just simply put the chimney sections together. Perhaps the majority of the time when you use your stove, you're just keeping the heat out of your kitchen in the summer, carrying it in the backyard. So maybe you're only using one chimney extension to keep the emissions out of your face with this stove. But in the event of a real emergency, you can go down to any hardware store, grab a 3-inch ducting, whether it's fixed elbow, swivel elbow, straight pipe, and cobble up whatever your needs are to go out your window, up your fireplace. Thus, this is the first portable biomass stove with a chimney you can use indoors. So in a prolonged emergency situation, or the winter, this is a great option to not have to go outdoors like you would with a rocket stove to cook outdoors. So you can see this stove, there's a little ridge. All you do is take the chimney and plug it in the louvered back of the stove. So I just take my chimney like this and insert it, and that's all there is to it. Now the only limitations of this stove are that the diameter of the pot. So if you have a pot with a diameter larger than 12 inches, the chimney will be a limitation. You can back it out a little bit or insert it, but for very large pots you may want to consider a rocket stove or our Super Dragon for very large pots. So that is the one limitation with the chimney, is the diameter of your pot. But the fantastic thing is, once I light this, I don't have to monitor and keep shoving fuel in it. The only time that I might have to re-add new fuel is, let's say I'm doing like a viscous chili and I forgot to soak my beans. Even a long cooking item like a chili, I typically can cook that in about 30-40 minutes if I've soaked the beans overnight. But if I taste the meat and it's done, the tomato broth, the vegetables or whatever, and my beans are still hard, then in that situation I may want to cook longer. That's a simple adjustment. Just open up the primary ventilation port here, introduce new fuel into the stove, get it going for about a minute or so, then I'm going to shut this door. Fuel is not fed in this door. This is a ventilation door with airflow below, primary ventilation below the stove, below the grate, the combustion chamber. You have primary and secondary air coming through the louvered back of the stove. This is an amazing stove. There's 3 levels of combustion in this stove. You have your airflow below the grate with your primary fire. You have your, there's ports mid-level in the combustion chamber, and then under the rim here we have secondary, those re-burning, the secondary burn, which makes this an amazingly clean stove. Then our pot on top is going to seal all the emissions in and force it out the chimney. So any type of cookware can be used on this stove, whether it's cast iron, whether it's stainless steel, it doesn't matter what type of cookware. You can use our grate. We have a little cooking grate for meat, for grilling. We just throw that right on top. So any type of cooking can be done on this stove. Now, the characteristics of this stove is a low mass stove. Like I mentioned, only 14 pounds. As you can see, with the exploded back of this stove right here, we can see the high quality pellet stove insulation around the combustion chamber. So this stove is going to get hot. It's a robust stove with a very large combustion chamber with long periods of cooking duration, like we mentioned. But if my little ones touch the sides, they're not going to come away with second, third degree burns because it is an insulated stove. It's warmer than a rocket stove underneath the stove. So you may want to have a flame-proof thin cheap tile or something underneath your stove to protect your table or what have you. So we're going to go ahead and light this stove and show you this stove. We'll also have reports of customers that are heating small greenhouses with small footprints, 12 by 12, 12 by 14. And what they'll do is they'll take a turkey pot, your tall 12-inch diameter pot, and that water becomes the mass, because you can see we don't have mass in the stove. And that they'll pack the stove with hardwood and drive the hardwood for 3-4 hours in heat for about 3-4 hours duration, heating a small greenhouse with the stove. And we've had reports of customers cutting their electric bill in half. So this is a really amazing stove. The characteristics of using this stove is its high firepower the first half hour. Then it goes to a wonderful simmering, waffling heat for the next 2 hours. And that's what you want on a well-designed stove on the front end, is high firepower on the front end, because you're browning meat, walking, frying multiple dishes, bringing multiple pots of water to a boil. And this stove right here can boil a gallon and a half of water with a lid in about 17 minutes flat. If we use our SilverFire Dragon stove that's trapping that additional heat underneath, we can cut that time down to about anywhere from 11 to 14 minutes typically. So this is a really high performing stove. It does boil large pots of water faster than any other rocket stove that we've ever tested. So it's really an amazing stove. So after that first high power burn, we go to low power cooking, the simmering for the next couple hours. So it's just a wonderful stove. But at any time, if I want to return to high firepower cooking, no problem. I just open the primary ventilation port and stick my fuel into the stove vertically. And you can see here that we've stacked our fuel in the stove vertically. And this could be corn cob, it could be palm fronds. We're using sticks today, it could be twigs, any flammable biomass. In a Tlud, you just simply insert your fuel vertical, like this, down in the combustion chamber. And we'll reposition the camera here to get a look at that. And we'll just take some smaller tinder, and we'll lay a good handful of small tinder on top of the fuel sticks. And remember that a Tlud, a top lit updraft stove, we light the fuel on the top and it simply burns down. So I'm going to take a piece of tack cloth with a little bit of linseed oil on it. And I like the flat tack cloth because I can spread it across my fuel and get a real even distribution of lighting this stove. The other thing that we do when we first ignite this stove is we have our primary ventilation port open, all the way open, until we get our flame established for a minute. Then we'll shut it to go to a clean burn. Now I'm going to add a little more tinder on top. Get a nice distribution of flame going here. We'll add a pine cone here, and we'll get that biomass, get that established. And now we have a very clean burn. You don't see a lot of smoke. The linseed cloth, the tack cloth is burning off. As soon as that tack cloth is burned off, then we'll be at a pretty clean boil here, a clean burn rather. So now I'll go ahead and I'll start dampening down the airflow a little bit. And looking at the chimney, you can see there's no emissions. We're going to take our pot and put our pot over the stove and seal everything up. And now it's safe for indoors. And we'll go ahead and shut the flame-shaped ventilation door in the front, and our smoke's very minimal. So with a Tlud, you have to have a lot of faith in the stove. Even though you're not seeing the flame, it is really drafting well and really burning clean. You can look at our chimney stack here and you don't see a bunch of smoke. This is a very, very clean burning stove. Now I'm going to lift the pot and show you the firepower underneath the stove. And if we get a close-up of this, we can see the secondary combustion starting the little propane-like fingers in the circumference of the stove. So we're going to go ahead and put our pot back on. And that's our SilverFire Hunter. Thank you.